For small influences on platforms like myself, sometimes we start to question ourselves. We ask ourselves, are we growing? Are we being heard? Is it worth it? Are we being effective? And I'm here to tell you to judge your actions not by the result it gets, but by its fidelity to your own calling and identity. Don't ask yourself if you're being effective, but only if you're being faithful. If you were called to do this, regardless if one person supports you or 1,000 support you, your soul should be happy with what you're doing. The call of the conscience takes precedence over the rational calculus of society that measures everything in terms of results. Just because you can't see the results does not mean that you're not effective. To those individuals who are homeless and hungry today, I want you to know I sincerely think of you. I would wash your feet to remove the steps traveled that brought you pain and sorrow. I would gladly and voluntarily be your humble servant so that you may experience love in its purest form on this day. What do you think Jesus was trying to teach us by washing his disciples' feet? Jesus wants us to serve others, wants us to think of others. Jesus was showing his disciples how much he loved them, John 13:1, and that they should serve others, John 13:14. Jesus, the divine master descended when the bringer of the light, had no problem kneeling down to his disciple. And I have no problem kneeling down to you to show you that we are intertwined. Your pain is humanity's pain. Surrender your frustration, surrender your worry and your stress. Make a commitment not to lead an anxiety-driven life when worries arise. Breathe them out of your body. Focus on the power of that heart and have faith that Spirit is guiding you always. The three parts of the mind, how it affects your decisions and your life. These distinct parts shape our personalities and identities. The three parts, namely the decision maker, the critic, and the observer, determines what we think, what we do, and what we feel. Other names for these parts of the mind are the ego and true self, or the contrived self and the real self. The critical portion demoralizes. Its inputs, judgments, opinions, and comments. It operates on the mental level. It plants doubts and it is disempowering. You might even call it the devil or deceiver. If your inner dialogue sound like this, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? You don't have the right education or contacts or skills or perseverance. You will never amount to anything. Everyone has an inner critic. It's time to silence that inner critic. Now, on the other hand, the performer keep you going. It's a deeper spiritual level. If the performer takes actions, know you can do what you set out to do, doesn't analyze the problem forever, and keeps moving. A child is born. Shortly thereafter, it is molded by society into something that is needed by society. The child becomes a utility, more like a part of a machine. Our society is a society of ignorance because it fails to see that every person is born with a destiny and that by molding him or her into something, we prevent that destiny. It does not want to take the risk of seeing what people would turn into and what society itself would turn into if people were allowed to let that destiny unfold within them with no external interference. You were born to be an expression of your soul in the physical dimension. You were not born to use this life to refine or improve yourself. We wait for society to put us where it wants us. It will put you exactly where it wants you. It will create for you a false identity so thick that you won't recognize that the deep emptiness you're feeling is because you're missing your own soul. In the emptiness of solitude, there is no one to reinforce the false identity. and cracks appear in its foundation, and the soul begins to leak through. The dark night of the soul is nothing more than a space between the false self and the real self. It is a groundless space. You are just being. You cannot do anything to become your true self. Rather, you must simply step out of the way of your true self. Stop restricting it. The Buddha talked about saving all beings from delusion, not covering or converting them to a new religion, but practicing love. The truth is, too many times I have felt broken apart by people to whom I give so much of myself to. I give away pieces to those who make me smile and laugh, to those who remind me that the world is not a dark, rigid place. But often I forget that many people are not like me, and too many times I've given too much away to someone who did not value it. But the cracks in my soul make me who I am, and the rough edges of my heart has allowed me to grow. I've been naive, but I have never been weak. Yes, I have lost some parts of myself that I will always be searching for, but there are still stars in my eyes and magic in my veins, and I would never let anyone take that from me. When you do shadow work, you're doing the work of radical self acceptance. Don't be afraid of the dark. Let's dive into your subconscious so you can clear your blocks and find your power. Great goddess, maiden, mistress, fierce queen, teach me to craft my own crown from the dust, blood, and tears of my pain. Working with your shadow allows you to slowly deepen many internal aspects of yourself and become more loving and kind to that which you previously rejected, eventually allowing you to become more compassionate to both yourself and others. What are your shadow aspects? Here are a few, but there's many more. Repression, hiding feelings and emotion, social anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, self-sabotage, selfishness, aggressiveness, impulsiveness, arrogance, shameful, fears, limiting belief, low self-esteem, negative self-talk, passive aggressive, gossiping, and much more. Here's an example of a koan. I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to tell you how it relates to koan. It's called A Cup of Tea. Nei-in, a Japanese master, had a professor come to his home to inquire about Zen. Nei-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched it overflow until he could no longer restrain himself. It is overfull. No more will go in. Why do you continue to pour? Like this cup, Nathan said, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? This is a popular koan that focuses on the value of learning, unlearning, and relearning. It challenges us to be sharp and free ourselves from our rigid thinking. The idea of the teacup being overflowing is a strong reference that reminds us to let go of things so that we can make space for new things and experiences to flow into our lives. However, the reality is that it's nearly impossible to forget what you have learned, and that is where the paradox lies. What we learn will always be retained in some capacity, like in your subconscious mind and our muscle memory. When you pour out what you have learned from the cup of your mind, you are actually letting go of the attachment of your ego to your learning and memory. This challenges you to release rigid views, opinions, and expectations. Koan, once again, is about stories, phrases, conversations, statements that challenge and transform conventional thinking and change how you live in the world by provoking an insight and break rigid thinking. This is for the people who don't understand. Sexuality and spirituality are both deeply personal and connected to our life force energy. Our attitudes about life, love, care, and compassion all are connected to our feelings about sexuality. We came to this earth through a sexual act. If life is sacred, then so is sexuality. There's no reason to be ashamed about it. It's important to remember that sex is not proof of being loved. Sex is not proof of being attractive. Sex doesn't cure problems. Sex doesn't mean you're lovable. Sex is not assurance against abandonment, even if you're terrific in bed. Sexuality is not always about partners and orgasms. It is related to the way we live in our own bodies and experience the sensual pleasures of life. We can be alive to our senses, yet not be controlled by them. Mistress of darkness, a woman who has power, authority, or ownership, a woman who governs.